House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Hello, hello, hello. Half a day. Liz is up there. Gina is on the other side. I am merely Jason, and I am down here. And we are House to Home. We're talking about each other collectively because we are here to give you all the information that you could ever want about Guam's real estate market, a wonderful, critical, essential industry that makes our island great. And ladies, one kind of like subset of the market that has always been a big thing and is the military market. But it's always been, there are military sales, dealing with the military, you've got certain conditions that you have to deal with as realtors. Has that relationship changed significantly over the last few years? And are there any opportunities or threats or, things that buyers and or sellers would have to be aware of?
Well, what we're getting right now is you may have been a landlord and you've rented to a military tenant, and you put in specific language, which are pretty standard. But the military housing office now has made sure that they do some protections to cover the tenant. And to some degree, the landlords feel like the verbiage is difficult to comply with sometimes. An example, if there's something wrong with the plumbing and there's a leak, they're requiring action within, let's say, an hour to 2 hours. There's specific language that would state that the landlord would respond within a certain window of time. Now, Guam, sometimes the plumber isn't available, or that they're not available till the following day, or let's say an issue crops up at midnight and we can't get a vendor out there. So although these things could happen, in the language of the lease, it states the landlord is responsible to respond within a certain time. If a landlord wants to entertain a military tenant, they do not have a choice but to sign the lease with the specific verbiage that is required. So again, there are certain requirements in the wording, including, for example, that after the lease ends, when you do your exit inspection, you have to return their security deposit within 3 days after they exit. So for these landlords that have been used to previous leases that may not have had restrictive verbiage in it, you just need to be aware when you renew it, the housing office does have required verbiage. Now, there are issues sometimes where you're responsible for that tenant. And lately, after the typhoon, there are extenuating circumstances, like the power wasn't connected. So I do know that the housing office is taking inventory on what properties are available out there, and also probably revamping maybe some of the verbiage. But an act of God or a typhoon situation, it's difficult to correct that when we're limited with the power situation and the water situation.
And we talked about that. That's covered under force majeure, as the lawyers would say. Like we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Now, Gina, I'd like to pick your brain about something because I'm almost 50, right? And I've seen a few things having grown up on Guam. In the 80s, in the Guam I grew up in, the only people that were in the military and that lived off base was the general up at Anderson, typically stayed in Paris Acres, and the admiral down at Naval Station typically lived in Nimitz Hill or something like that. Everybody else, like all the enlisted people, even some of the officers, typically lived on base. Now you're kind of hard pressed to find people that live on base because most military dependents will live off base because the allowances have provided for that. I also know that it's kind of I wouldn't call it a trend, but it's very, very popular for, someone who's stationed here maybe like 3, 4, 5 years to just buy a property knowing they're going to be reassigned and move up, ship off to another place in the world. They buy a property, albeit temporarily, and then they turn that into an investment and then flip that and then either wind up being, a landlord and they collect revenue on that, or they just sell it to somebody else. So are you seeing that as more of a popular thing these days? And do you expect that to change anyway?
I think it's changed a little bit. In previous years, you're absolutely right. I think in previous years, we had more military people looking in the marketplace for rentals and they realized at that point, I'm talking a couple years ago, at that point, it actually seemed like it was more reasonable for them to buy because the interest rates were so low that if they bought a home and they were paying mortgage payments, the mortgage payments ended up being lower than what the rents were. That's how competitive the Guam market was. The rents.
So it's even more cost efficient. They said, oh, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, a few years ago, but that's changed within the last year because the interest rates have climbed to the point now that if you're buying a $500,000 home, you're paying upwards of $3,000 a month.
Mhm.
So it actually makes more sense for you to be renting right now. And then the other reason that more people are living on base than they were back then is there wasn't enough housing on base, but that too has changed. The military has built housing on base. And so back in January, February, a memo came out to military family members saying, listen, if you're a family unit, you're going to live on base because we have these brand new homes that were just completed. I think for the bachelors, that's not the case. There's still not enough housing for bachelor members. So they're allowed to live off base. But the family, if you're a family coming to Guam, there's still a lot of housing available, brand new housing, as a matter of fact, available for you on base. And so there's restrictions. Not only
So
is
it was a problem of scarcity back then too.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
I just
But
thought it
but
was a popular thing to do because if there's a chance to make money and turn a few bucks and put some elbow grease into a property, then go for it. I didn't realize
I
that.
think in terms of the growing number of people that were buying, that were military members that were buying, the reason they were doing that is you really were with the interest rates as low as they were 2-3 years ago, even 4 years. Yeah, even 4 years ago, your mortgage payment was lower than your rent. But at this point, that is not the case anymore. And so we are seeing more people renting, but of course they've got housing available on base. So, there's not as a big influx as we would expect right now, because there's still housing on base. So they're taking advantage of that.
Okay, now, Liz, what we want to do in this show, and we've said this since we started doing this, the three of us 10 years ago, is we're giving people opportunity and learning how to recognize opportunity, right? For those sellers who want to appeal to the military market, and even given the fact that, maybe their tastes have evolved or changed or things like that, the architecture of housing has changed over the years, obviously. What should a seller do to properly market and really become attractive to a military buyer?
Well, right now, of course, location is the factor. So military buyers want to be close to the base. So if they're at Naval Station, they usually like from Tamuning down towards the naval base and some areas in the southern area, they would pick a home. But to make it more attractive, right now with the interest rates being so high, we're seeing sellers do some incentives, like they'll pay for a percentage of the closing costs. So that way the buyer can come in and purchase. But then again, a military buyer will look at what is my housing allowance budget. And if I paid X amount and this is the mortgage amount, what is the monthly payment? And of course, as a military tenant or a buyer, you don't want to spend more than your housing allowance. So they would look at what that mortgage would be. And then hopefully the two things that a seller can do for a military buyer is reduce the rent to make it reasonable for them. And the other thing is to offer an incentive, like paying a percentage or X amount, like 10,000, 12,000, whatever the case may be, depending on the purchase price, so that it makes it easier for the military buyer to purchase the property with less monies out of their pocket and close the transaction.
So, Gina, same question to you. Are there any features or amenities about a property that make it more amenable to the military market, like with solar panels, perhaps, or big bay windows, or because Liz has already talked about cost and proximity to base?
Well, here's the thing, the buyer pool is a younger generation of people. And so I noticed that even if you have an older home, there's a lot of brand new houses on the market. Of course, if I were buying, I'm going to look at that. And then I have to tweak in my head, okay, my price range is this, but I still have some expectations. I still want it to look, you know, I still want it to look really good. So if I were coaching a seller, I would say, listen, if you can afford to paint the outside, if it needs it and you can afford to paint it, paint it. If you can afford to paint the inside, paint that. The next thing is scrub everything down. I mean, bleach is your friend right now. You know, get everything as clean as you can get it. I'm telling you, that's the name of the game. If you're
Well,
not
you're
working
talking to the guy who's still got 200 bottles of hand sanitizer like in my closet right now at any given point.
there you go. And you know, whether you're trying to attract the military market or just trying to attract a bigger pool of people to come and look at your home and fall in love with your home, it doesn't even matter. If you're already in the market and you know you're going to sell, those would be my advice. Scrub it up, do the art. And then the last and final thing is, you know, you're on your way out, start boxing your goods. You know, if you have a space, if you don't have anywhere to put it, at least box it up so it looks less lived in. I cannot tell you how often I go into our multiple listing service and I look at properties that are listed for sometimes even for rent, but particularly for sale. And I see how it looks like my house. It's cluttered. It looks lived in. Well, wait a minute. You're on your way out the door. Make sure it's obvious. Bag up all your extra stuff that you absolutely don't need anymore. Put it in a box. If you have to stack it in one room, or put it in your garage if you're lucky enough to have a garage, or put it in storage. Get it out of there so that the buyers can visualize living in the home so that it is less cluttered.
Okay,
And
final
those
question.
are
I want you
my
guys to
best
give away a huge secret. Let the cat out of the bag on this one, right? Final question, and both of you can jump in on this as you see fit, right? There have always been areas, and Liz, you mentioned location, 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 right? That's the number one rule in business. Paradise Estates is always popular. Cross Island Road is always popular. Happy Landing Road is popular. Sleepy Lagoon. These are the obvious ones, right? What in each of your professional, learned, expert opinions are the untapped gems on Guam as far as places where military tenants may want to live?
There's actually a lot of new projects out there. So in terms of on tap, sometimes, I mean, we just placed a couple military tenants that they gravitated towards a brand new house. And luckily their budget, it was applicable. That's pretty much more what they're looking for, like something new, something fresh, like Gina puts it, something modern. So a lot of the tenants are just right now in terms of untapped, I would say the brand new houses are pretty much what people are looking for. So it's of course the location, but if they found something in the outskirts of Jotnia, for example, and it's modern and it's new and they work at Naval Station, they'll gravitate to that piece of property. So again, it's how you stage your property, how you promote it. As Gina puts it, scrub it down, fresh new coat of paint, upgrade it, modernize it a bit more, because I think that's more important than sometimes the location.
And Gina, of course, you can never go wrong with a great view.
Yeah, you can never go wrong with a great view and a bottle of Clorox.
Are you the unofficial spokeswoman for bleach on this episode? Or?
I grew up old school. My mom used Clorox and everything.
Well, like my grandma in Salumpus. Right? Yes, ma'am.
But the view comes with a price. Bear in mind, the view comes with a price. So it just depends on their budget, right?
Okay, and if you are in the military right now, regardless whichever branch of service you are, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force, Army, Navy, we thank all of you for our service. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please visit my ladies, Liz and Gina, over at RE/MAX Diamond Realty Guam. They will absolutely take care of you. So thank you for your service once again. And ladies, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.